All right. So, because child, you came in talking about the Monroe. So the Monroe Doctrine. My question is, the Trump administration, was it legal for the Trump administration to go into Venezuela and capture former
Yeah,
President Nicolas Maduro?
yeah. The Monroe Doctrine required it, and the Monroe Doctrine, being a congressional act, has to comply with the Constitution. It complies with Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution and Article 6. Article 1, Section 8 specifically says it's the duty of the Commander in Chief in the armed services of the United States to pursue, eradicate, and suppress piracy wherever found. That's why the Marines have that from the halls of Montezuma. That was the Mexican American War in 1842 to the shores of Tripoli, which was 1806 when they fought the Barbary pirates. And that is also subject to the other provision in Article 1, Section 8, which is it is the duty of the commander in chief, et cetera, to, quote, enforce the law of nations, unquote. And the law of nations are subject to Article 6, which says ratified treaties become part of the supreme law of the land. And there are quite a few ratified treaties that the U.S. is privy to that were ignored by previous administrations that required us to do something about the international shipment and distribution of narcotics. And we're not just talking about fentanyl, which is bad enough. We're talking about heroin, other opiates. We're talking about cocaine, lots and lots of coke. So also guns being trafficked too, because the illegal guns aren't sold across the counter. They come in the crates along with the kilos of dope.
Right.
And that is not really a full-fledged effort anyway, because the drug trafficking, the arms trafficking is used as a way to raise funds off the books to deal with black ops, which means you're trying to previously take on communist forces or now so-called terrorist or extreme elements of fanaticism. So it is what it is.
Can you give us the history of the? Well, actually, wait. Before I ask you for the history, let me just play this clip because you know Donald Trump, honey. He's calling it the Don Doctrine.
All of these actions were in gross violation of the core principles of American foreign policy, dating back more than 2 centuries, and not anymore. All the way back, it dated to the Monroe Doctrines, and the Monroe Doctrine is a big deal, but we've superseded it by a lot, by a real lot. They now call it the Monroe Document. I don't know. It's Monroe Doctrine. We sort of forgot about it. It was very important, but we forgot about it. We don't forget about it anymore. Under our new national security strategy, American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again.
He calls it the Monroe Doctrine because of dominance. See,
Oh, I thought he was saying Don because of Donald Trump.
no. Dominance. See, here's the thing. The U.S. had just gotten away from Great Britain. It finally set up a navy, gotten some authority to setting up a great economy, agrarian and industrial. And they did not want any more of the problems that had been had with France, Spain, and England messing around in the New World. So they were saying, okay, you guys go along with stuff that is tolerable, it's okay. But if anybody comes in here and gets out of line, we're not going to give this a moment where totalitarianism can come in here. Now, the fact of the matter is, Venezuela, Peru, and Argentina had big navies toward the end of the 19th century. They bought a lot of warships made in England. We had let our navy just rot after the Civil War, and there was nothing. So we had nothing. So when they decided that they were going to start seizing American ships on the high seas, Venezuela specifically, Congress said, this is embarrassing. We're probably the greatest industrial country in the world, or about there. We've got the whole continent under our sway, Pacific coast to East Coast, railways, and we can't even protect our interest. We need a navy. So they authorized the first two battleships that we got. One of them was number two. That was the Maine. And remember, the Maine was the justification for the Spanish-American War, where the nascent American fleet got in some real quality combat time and annihilated the Spanish Navy down in Cuba and then in the Philippines in the Pacific.
The Monroe Doctrine, U.S. foreign policy stated in 1823 that warned European powers against further colonization or interference in the Western Hemisphere. So basically, we tell other countries, stay out of our business over here. What we do over here is what we do. Never mind you interfering.
Yeah, in other words, see, we could have taken Canada, and all of that would have been much better had it been under our domain. We wound up buying Alaska from the Russians. We're trying to get Greenland right now from the Scandinavians. We got a good swath of our country from France when we had the Louisiana Purchase. We acquired Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and California from the Spanish, and we also got not Cuba, but Guantanamo, the naval base in the middle of Cuba. We got the Philippines, we set them free. We got control of Panama. We signed a 99-year lease, but when Noriega got out of hand, we went down there and get it together. Ain't gonna be no S like that,
Yeah, with the whole
And we got Puerto Rico that is eligible to become a state, and we have American Samoa and Hawaii and all of these things, and we have expanded.
Asserting separate spheres of influence in exchange for the U.S. staying out of European conflicts, becoming a cornerstone of American strategy to protect newly independent Latin American nations and U.S. interests, evolving from defensive to justifying intervention through the Roosevelt corollary. Yeah. So key principles of the doctrine: non-colonization. American continents are closed to future European colonizations. Non-intervention. European nations shouldn't interfere in political affairs of the Americas. Separate spheres. The U.S. and Europe should remain in distant hemispheres with separate political systems. Reciprocity. The U.S. would not meddle in European wars or internal matters. But don't we do that anyway?
Yeah, we kind of sort of walk softly, carry a big stick.
Right. So the initial goal: protect newly independent Latin American nations from European recolonization, asserting U.S. influence. Trump did say we are going to be taking control of the Venezuelan government until a proper suitable leader surfaces.
Can I translate?
Yes.
2 years before I was born, we concluded World War II. When we finished up World War II, it was not Russia, it was not China, it was certainly not Germany. It was the United States that had fielded the largest military in world history. We had 18 million people under uniform. There has never been a war-fighting organization that big or as well equipped. We had everything: fleet, Marines, Army, Air Force. Nobody could deal with us and the atomic bomb because we had Albert Einstein and the Manhattan Project, and we did our thing. So,
Bless you. Bless you. Bless you. Bless you.
Ah,
It says
so
the Roosevelt Corollary 1905, President Theodore Roosevelt expanded it, allowing the U.S. to intervene in Latin American countries to prevent European intervention, shifting from defensive to justifying U.S. intervention.
See, what we did is they had the voyage of the Great White Fleet, and we painted our Navy white. And Roosevelt sent the Navy on a worldwide tour. It circumnavigated the globe and visited everybody's biggest harbor and said, hey, look what we got.
Cornerstone policy, bless you again, become a fundamental part of U.S. grand strategy in the Americas throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. Background. Spain's colonies were gaining independence, and there were fears of European powers trying to reclaim them or Russia expanding in the Northwest. John Quincy Adams' role, U.S. Secretary of State John Quincy Adams, was crucial in persuading President Monroe to issue an independent American statement emphasizing U.S. sovereignty and foreign policy. So Monroe Doctrine come from President Monroe.
Mm-hmm. It's 202 or 3 years old. What is 1823?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Wow, it's 203
Slavery
years
wasn't
old.
even outlawed then.
Yeah.
Slavery was still going on. But it's funny though, because it's not funny. Even though, so issuing the Monroe Doctrine, right, during 1823, slavery was still legal in America, and slavery was still legal in South America, where you have Brazil, which was colonized by Portugal, Spain and others. So Portugal was benefiting from slavery in Brazil, not America, but we didn't intervene with their legal economy practice.
They were benefiting by what the Dahomians were doing. By the way, Dahomey was the subject of that farcical mess of the woman king that everybody wanted to go see. I just thought it was.
Are you really going to blame the
I'm just saying the absurdity of all of these Negroes piling up and delivering enormous box office to go see one of the primary instruments in enslavement in world history, the Dahomians, and want to sit there and, it was such a great movie. What's wrong with you, fool? That's like Jews going out and giving massive box office to go deal with sellouts during the Holocaust or something. That's crazy.
All right, so I don't want to go too far.
I mean, it's just ignorance. The public gets propagandized into believing practically anything. So now we've got the Democrats trying to say, oh my God, he's a warmonger. Well, let's put it this way. Your boy, Democratic President John F. Kennedy, had the embargo on Cuba. Your boy, Woodrow Wilson, let's not forget this, sent the Marines into Haiti and created this mess that we are still dealing with to this day, set up Papa Doc and all of that. That was 1922, 1923. Excuse me, your guy, Barack Obama, went and wiped out Osama bin Laden in recent times, okay. So exactly what is this? It was, guess what? Democratic President Monroe that came up with this doctrine in the first place. So what are you squawking about? It's your guys that did it.
I guess they're going to say, those were the racist Democrats that turned Republican today. No.
Yeah, well, the Democratic Party is still about the same thing the old slave Democratic Party was about, except instead of growing cotton, where cotton is king, they got tranny queen rainbow that everybody goes off on. So,
So, all right, terrorists, right? So United States has declared Cartel de los Soles as a terrorist group.
Yeah, that's the two sons, de los Soles. Soles is a son. That's the emblem from the Venezuelan general staff that runs the drug trade.
So it says the Department of State intends to designate Cartel de las Soles as foreign terrorist organization. This was back in November 24th, 2025. Based in Venezuela, the Cartel de las Soles is headed by Nicolas Maduro and other high-ranking individuals of illegitimate Maduro regime who have corrupted Venezuela military, intelligence, legislature, and judiciary. Neither Maduro nor his cronies represent Venezuela's legitimate government. Cartel de las Soles by and with other designated FTOs, including Tren de la Agua. I know I'm tearing up that name, but that is the gangs that came here during the open border and increased in numbers.
Damn fool Biden administration. Damn fool Harris was in charge of the southern border. A bunch of damn fools. I wish there was something they could be tried for treason on, because they sure as the devil compromised our interest.
And the Sinaloa cartel are responsible for terrorist violence throughout our hemisphere, as well as for trafficking drugs into the United States and Europeans. That is all true.
Now, and by the way, we haven't seen the last of it yet. Hamas doesn't like us.
Right.
ISIS doesn't like us. Al-Qaeda hates our very guts. Iran doesn't like us. North Korea doesn't like us. The Chinese are grinning as they scoop in the money from their investments in the American economy and say, it wouldn't hurt to get you guys a little settled down by a little bit of internal strife. And these jerks let in all of these interests across our border, welcome them in with military-grade explosives in their backpacks. Nobody even checked to see what they brought in with them. And they are in place, and they don't have to go play suicide bomber now, strapped down. I'm going to blow myself up. Boom, and I go with the blast. They can say, well, let's arm the device. Okay, flip the switch. Boom. Oh, that's a big explosion over there on the horizon. I guess we got them. Yay.
So, where are we at right here? Oh.
There is this thing, you left-wing curs. Get your balls grown. Make them filled with cast iron, or at least clay. There's this thing in world history called might makes right. And until you get it, you aren't worth governing, because you give it away like you were trying to under the Biden-Harris administration. When you say, come on in, take us over, blow us up, if you get mad.
Well, somebody in the chat said, when is the international? And honestly, I do not acknowledge questions in the chat unless it's in the form of a super chat. So I'm not going to say a name, but I will ask the question. When is the international court going to intervene? Okay. For what?
If we give them permission.
Right. And people don't
understand. We give them permission.
People don't understand this, Judge, because we're talking about the UN and international courts. See, other countries, they don't have that caveat. They don't have that leverage. We are the only ones that, I forgot the name of it, but it's like you know how you all make a pact and you sign an agreement. United States is the only one that didn't sign whatever agreement to be upheld by the international law, but we gave ourselves power to veto ourselves from international law.
No, you know what it is?
I know I'm saying it kind of wrong, but it's something.
Let me explain what it is. It's
we can exempt ourselves from that.
It is 1876. You're on the American frontier, complete lawlessness. Billy the Kid has been running amok. You've got a bunch of folk, Jesse and James and his crew have been doing their thing. And here's the U.S. Marshal. He's saying, I tell you what, I got my pistol on my hip, my 12 gauge in the cradle of my arm, and I'm going to blow anybody away that gets out of line. Now, let's see if you want to take me on, and I got my posse with me, too. So that's what's going on. In other words, may I translate very down to the bottom of this thing? You don't like it, we'll kick your ass. And if we choose not to kick your ass, you need to understand that we are not kicking your ass because we choose not to. Now, if you're Russia or China, no point in us duking it out because we're kind of equal. So you guys ain't worth that yet. But if we can sneak in a punch while they are debating whether or not it's worth taking us on and exterminating the human race, or at least blasting everybody back to the Stone Age, we will kick your ass. And it ain't going to be no shit like Vietnam.
Well,
We learned our lesson.
let me.
And there's no big military in the world right now outside of what's happening with Russia and Ukraine that has got as much recent military experience, where they have non commissioned officers and officers in all ranks who've been shot at, didn't run, and showed balls and did what they had to do and learned the trade of killing. So we are good at it.
Well, I need to freshen up on my UN laws and rules and regulations, because I actually visited the UN in college and took a course in that. It's very fascinating. But at the end of the day, the UN really don't do shit. I wanted to
We
read.
started this thing. See, we came up with the League of Nations
Yes.
and we started it, but our Senate refused to ratify the treaty, so we weren't part of it. World War II happened, and at the end of World War II, the United States set up NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, SEATO, South Eastern Treaty Organization, and the United Nations. Now, all of the countries that became part of the UN had a vote, but it was interesting. The United States, Russia, England, France had veto authority. In other words, because of the status of the militaries involved, they could say, hey, we don't like it. I don't care what you voted on. We veto it. We've got veto power.
Right. That's what I was trying to get to. Right. Thank you. It says here, U.S. isn't entirely exempt from international law, but asserts sovereignty, often not recognizing international criminal court jurisdiction or ratifying certain treaties like UNCLOS, creating unique exceptions, though it treats international law as binding when it chooses, integrating treaties into its legal system and subject to judiciary review for compliance, particularly concerning sovereign immunity for foreign nations under the FSIA.
Was that AI generated?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, sounds like it. It's bullshit. Bottom line is, if our president doesn't want it, it ain't gonna happen. Our Constitution says our president is our chief diplomatic officer, and if he said ain't no way, no how, then go screw yourself. You get screwed. So
I want you to give the public a tip, because you really don't like it when I get to Googling and the AI come up with stuff or whatever. So and you always say that doesn't mean it's actually accurate. So if someone wanted to today, if you want to get accurate information, would you suggest people like going to their library, to the archives? Like, where would you suggest people go outside of AI and Google search?
all places. You can use AI. It won't help to get sources, but be aware of what AI has called hallucinations. For example, Alaska set up an AI system to deal with its probate courts.
Mhm.
All kinds of complaints about my condolences. It would chat with the people. They didn't want to hear this thing say condolences or anything, so then it got too abrupt. But it hallucinates and it checks the web and it goes everywhere in the world to come up with solutions that don't happen to be applicable to where you need the solution. So, for example, people would say, how do I get a good lawyer to handle a probate matter since my grandparent died? Okay. And it will say, you can go to the records of law schools, and there are recent law graduates in Alaska that came out of our law schools. You should check and see if you can find a lawyer there. Well, Alaska doesn't have a law school. So that was so much bullshit. It was what they call a hallucination. And when you go and Google stuff, if you go to the top of the page over to the left, that's if you go directly through Google and you're not just touching on the stuff, you will see you can opt out of having AI generated answers. Now, a lot of times, if you do that, you will find you get something entirely different. You can have debates with AI. X's Grok is sometimes real full of shit because it does not know what it is doing and it's taking a perspective and you can twist it around
Mhm.
and bust the thing with it. And see, there is this point where our law is probably the best that's ever been compounded when it comes to dealing with the thing called human nature. It
Mhm.
tries to accommodate it. And humanity is not perfect, nor should it be. There is an element in what humans do that is not logical, and it shouldn't be. For example, these driverless cars that they were having operate, uh, they are programmed to protect the passengers, right? Well, here's a 3 year old child dashes out between two parked cars. The algorithm is going to say squash the kid and save the people in the car. But that irrational, non logical thing that is part of humanity will say, oh, heck, I got to take this one. And you crash and you save the 3 year old child. See,
Mhm.
those things still have not been resolved and
Right. Well, I want to.
not yet.
So just to end on the Monroe Doctrine segment, honey. Listen, I don't know who is running a White House X account. It must be somebody young, a young Gen X or millennial or Gen Z. But I thought this was creative.
Venga por mí. Aquí no espero en Miraflores. No se tarde en llegar, cobarde.
And now, if you don't know, now you know.
I like Trump. He's got style.
So,
See, you know what? The mistake was made back in the Reagan era when they deregulated the television industry, the news reporting, and they did not maintain fairness in reporting. So, what happens is you allow the number one propaganda engine in the whole world that everybody that was into propaganda studied, that was the American Hollywood industry, to put its full weight behind the people it thought it wanted. And that's what you have now. The American public has been propagandized to go for bullshit. So now you have Trump who comes in, and I like that. He's 6 feet, what, 5? And he comes in and,
I
he's
think
got
too.
what the Romans call gravitas, gravity. He's a heavyweight dude, don't take any mess. And he walks in, you got the officers lined up on the side here. That's impressive. You put the music to the background. He gets the point across. This is badass.
Oh, and I do like the selection. They could have bleeped out the N word, but that was Biggie. That's my generation because you don't like hip hop, but it works well with this clip. So
Yeah, in other words, I will kick your ass. And the public has been propagandized to listen to that through hip hop rap, gangster rap for a long time. So I tell folk, you don't have to look like a thug to be able to vest power. Sometimes the guys with the suits on got a whole lot more juice than you do.
mhm.
And I
um,
like this. It's like, what did Roosevelt say?
what?
Speak softly, carry a big stick.
What?
He said, speak softly and carry a big stick. In other words, I will whip your ass. See my stick,
Oh my god.
Bam.